Hello, welcome to Power BI learning series once again. In the last video 4.1, Dbot had a question about a fact table containing two different date columns and how to create measures based upon both. In this example, we are going to discuss a similar scenario wherein the fact tables schema is being shown in the screen. Have a look into this. Of course, the sample file is available. You can make use of that also. Quite a number of questions. I'm not going to read any one of them. Maybe you can pause the video and read the contents to understand what are the tasks that are to be performed in this activity. In the third part of this video series, you might have downloaded the calendar template. For this discussion, I am providing a sample file. Please check the description for the link. If you want to practice the steps demonstrated in this video, please use both the template file and the sample file. The data used for this demo is very simple. We have a fact table called Asia, in which there is a calendar table called CY, which is organized between January to December. And in the fact table, we have a column called the profit, on which we are going to create some reports. The Asia table contains two different date columns, as already mentioned. One is called order date, one is called ship date. And we need to connect the date column from CY table to both order date and ship date. When we try to do that, naturally, one of the relationships will be called active relationship, which will be denoted by a solid line, and another relationship will be called as inactive relationship, that will be denoted by dotted lines. The DAX functions that we are going to discuss in this demonstration are use relationship, and then there is something called last date. This is known as a semi-additive function in DAX. This function first identifies the last date and then apply it as a filter for the calculation. This function is not supported for use in direct query mode when used in calculated columns or row level security rules. The third function that we are going to discuss is called a treat as, which will be best to be used when a relationship does not exist between the tables. This function creates a sort of virtual relationship between two tables which cannot be really connected. This function is not supported for use in direct query mode similar to the last date function, and it will not participate in RLS rules. In fact, treat as is an important function to simplify your models. I'll come out with an exclusive video on this function. Please don't miss it. Let us now focus on the main function called use relationship, which will temporarily convert an inactive relationship into an active relationship. However, it needs an existing relationship. It should be used within modifiers such as calculate, calculate table, and the like. Generally, it is not a good idea to use this function in calculated columns. It cannot be used if you want to implement row level security. When you look at the formula given here, profit SD equals calculate profit OD, which means we are trying to calculate the profit values in terms of ship date and order date using this function called use relationship, which needs two arguments. The first one is the ship date column, which is in fact inactive, which needs to be converted into active with reference to the date column from the calendar table called CY. Like the previous video, we do have a simple quiz with 10 questions, which you can try to attend after watching the entire video. You can pause the questions, have a look into them, mark your answers, or ask your questions in the comment section so that I can respond in case you need any clarity. Hope all of you can attend this simple quiz and score 100% marks for this. Okay, let us do the hands-on activity now. You will be able to see the Excel file in the screen. We have an order date column, ship date column, and the profit column. Before trying to do anything in Power BI, let me try to create a pivot table from this data in which I'll pull order date to the rows area and then the profit into my values area. Realign the pivot table to show the data only for year values. So what is the profit per year? And this particular pivot table is now talking about order date. That means I have used the order date column to create this pivot table. I can copy and paste this pivot table. Now, instead of order date, I'm going to create the same report using the ship date. If I'm talking about profit in terms of the order date column, then for 2010, what is the value? If I'm talking about profit in terms of the ship date column, then for 2010, what is the value? Even though the totals at the end of the day is going to be the same, you can see the figures are different for different years when we speak about either order date or ship date. That is quite obvious because I might have received an order in the month of say November or December, which might have been executed in the month of January or February of the next year and so on. So there should be a difference between the values of profit when we speak in terms of order date or ship date. What kind of analysis we can do when we have a scenario like this? For which let us go to the Power BI file in which my calendar template is already loaded. The Asia table is already loaded. However, I have not created relationship between my CY table's date column and that of the fact table. I'm going to click on the Manage Relationships option, then click on New Relationship, select my CY table in which the date column needs to be connected to Asia table's order date column. So this is the first relationship I am creating, one to many, cross filter direction is single. Make this relationship active. The checkbox is automatically checked. Let me say OK to that. Close this. I'll now be able to see a solid line moving from date column of CY table to the order date column of the Asia table. So this is an active relationship. If you want to create yet another relationship between the CY table's date column and that of the Asia table's ship date column, this time you can pretty much notice that this box is not checked automatically, which means that there can be only one active relationship in this scenario. Anyways, I'm just going to let this happen. I'm going to click OK, close. Then I'll be able to see that the second relationship has been created between the same date column of CY to Asia table's ship date column, but this time it has been denoted by a dotted line, which means this is inactive. At any point of time, I can change which should be active or inactive. As of now, the connection between date column of CY table and order date column of Asia table is kept active, and we are going to do a couple of activities with these connections. I have already created a parking table for keeping all my measures, and within that I'm going to create my first measure. Profit in terms of order date is nothing but the Asia table's profit column getting a summation. And the second measure I want to create using calculate function is the important one. I'm going to create profit in terms of a ship date, calculate profit by order date. I have already calculated profit by order date. The order date column is actively connected with the CY table's date column. Now use relationship between the Asia table's ship date column, which is currently inactive, with that of my CY table's date column. This will temporarily switch which should be the active connection. Let me create a very simple table, year values from my CY table, and then call for the two measures, profit by order date, profit by ship date. We have just created one single report in which I'll be able to show the profit either in terms of order date column or in terms of the ship date column. Let us quickly compare whether the report I have created is correct, because we normally believe Excel's pivot tables in which we work a lot. So have a look, 2010 order date, it starts 7335, 7335, I'm good to go. Ship date 6803, 6803, I'm good to go. Okay, so the first task is successfully completed. I'm now creating one more measure called variance, which will find out the difference between order date and ship date. I'm converting this into a percentage value and then including this measure into my table. I have just added two slicers, one for years and another one for the quarters. Now I'm going to create a line chart year from my CY table and then the two measures, profit by order date and profit by ship date. Now, when I look at the data for year 2013 and 2014, I could see from 2013 to 2014, there is a shift of negative variance to positive variance. I'm more interested to show the chart only for these 3 years, say 2012, 2013 and 2014. That is one of the requirements. Okay. So how do we make a change in this? Can I right click there, say exclude, so that I can exclude 1 year? I can try to do all these things. Maybe I can try to do this 2017. I can say I want to exclude. Okay, I can do all these things. However, there is yet another way in which this can be performed. I'm not going to exclude any years at this point of time. Rather, I would like to switch on a tool, formatting tool called the zoom slider. Switch that on, and whenever you have a numerical value either in x-axis or y-axis, zoom sliders will work. So, with the help of the tool called zoom slider, now I'm able to focus only on 3 years. 2012, what happened? 2013, what happened? 2014, things are moving up. Okay, so this is the idea of creating the variance percentage so that I can easily identify what are the years on which I need to make a focus. And then the most important requirement is, Raja, can you create a descriptive statement on these 3 years? Insert, I'm going to make use of AI visual, artificial intelligent visual. I'm going to make use of one particular visual called a smart narrative. I have just inserted a smart narrative which speaks about the current status of this visual. And if I'm going to choose 3 particular years, 2012, 2013, and then 2014. So 3 particular years were selected by me, out of which I'm now going to click on. Now you can see there is a change in the smart narrative. Or I can say Q2, or I can say Q3, then you will be able to see what is happening here. Smart narrative will be useful to create quick descriptions about your visuals, which you can alter according to your requirement. We have successfully completed task 1 as well as task 2. We are now moving to task 3, where the CFO of the organization needs a visual to see the latest order date in a given year, given month, and the total profit booked for that order date. We need to be careful about one important thing, that the last working day should not necessarily be the last day in the calendar. With this information, let us move to Power BI, where I have already created the required visual, and I will explain how it happens. The first visual is the year slicer, second visual is the month slicer, and then I have created a card to get the date value from order date column in the Asia table. You may now ask me a question. Wait, Mr. Raja, in all the previous examples, you are pulling the dates only from the calendar table, if what we remember is correct. And then suddenly, why you are now moving to the order date column from the fact table? Because the last working day can be found here easily. So, I'm using the order date column from the fact table. And then, what is this last day profit in terms of order date? I have used a DAX function called LASTDATE. This is a very peculiar function which is known as a semi-additive function in DAX. This function called LASTDATE first identify the date on which a transaction has happened and then applies a filter, and then for that particular date the values are summated. Again, you can see even for the LASTDATE function, I have not used the date column from the calendar table. I have used the date column from the fact table. So when I speak about this particular visual, I would like to make it more clear that in both the card visuals, I have picked up dates only from the fact table's date column, be it order date, be it ship date, whatever you want. I am picking them from the fact table. Okay, Raja. The information given by you is noted by us. And then tell me how these two cards are going to show me the last working day in a given month and the totals for that. Can you just confirm that the results shown in the cards are going to be correct? All right. Let me choose a particular year, 2015, and then I choose a particular month called April. Latest order date card showing 29th April 2015, and the profit value shows 1.88 million. So let us check that with the Excel file and then identify if everything is good. I have now opened the Excel file and filtered the order date column for the given year, given month, given date, 29th April 2015. And when I look at the profit column, the total is shown somewhere here, which exactly matches with the result shown in the card. It says 1.88 million and the Excel files give somewhere around 1.87, 1.78. So this is a confirmation that the last date function is capable of identifying the last working date and then add the values for that in the profit column. Okay. What about this date being shown in the card? I'm just using the order date column from the fact table as intimated already, and I'm using an option called latest order date. Just to ensure that we are getting a confirmation about the correctness of the formula once again, I'm going to choose the last year in the database, 2017. Going to choose the last month here. So 2017 December, the last order date says 7th of December and the profit total says 1.67 million. Let us quickly check that just to get a reconfirmation that the formula or DAX function is working correct. So instead of 2015, I'm going to choose 2017. I'm going to move to December. I can now see dates only up to 7th December in the fact table's order date column. And when I choose that, I'll be able to see the total value here, which I can verify with my card value, and both of them are same, which clearly mentions that the last date function used by me is working perfectly correct. So that is the end of the task 3. We will be now moving to task 4. The requirement in task 4 is slightly different. So one of your team members is interested in typing a date and then wanted to find out what was the date typed by him in the slicer and what was the profit for that particular date. You may ask me a question, Raja, what is the difference between task 3 and task 4? Task 3 is very clearly about the last working day, whereas task 4 could be any day. In addition to that, in this example, I am not going to depend upon the fact table's date column. Rather, I would like to make use of my calendar table's date column. So let us examine how I have created the setup here. The first visual here is a slicer that gets the dates from calendar table's date column. And the slicer has been set up in such a way that it is showing the slider for the dates after the given date. So when I'm choosing 29th here, it is showing 29th and anything beyond that, not prior to that. And then the card visual picks up information from the same date column of the calendar table, which is using the earliest date. I have just renamed the visual as a selected date. And here comes the trick of the card, for which I have used a function called treatas, which is a very versatile function which can be discussed again in another video. And in this example, I'm using variables because I have to declare a variable called myDate, which will be picked from the slicer. And then I'm transforming the date called myDate to my calendar using the treatas function. Treatas is a beautiful function that can be used to connect two different tables which are not connected. And finally, I'm using a very simple if logic to ensure that I don't see a blank remark when I choose a calendar date on which there were no transactions in my organization. Just for example, if I'm going to choose 30th April instead of 29, you can see that I get a remark called no transaction, which means that on 30th April, there was no transaction in my company. And I think probably we all remember that same thing. In the previous example, when I was choosing 2015 April, you are able to see 29th was the last working day in that particular imaginary organization, and that point is captured here using the very simple if condition. So if that is not a working day, probably I don't have a profit column value, and this formula may return a blank value. Had it been a blank, give me a description saying that there were no transaction on that particular day. So treatas is a very simple function that is going to take up only this particular date to be considered, and the total values are picked up. Once again, let us make a quick check with our Excel file just to ensure that this function is working fine. Let me choose maybe a different year, 2014, say Feb, say 5th. So 5th February 2014 is the selected date, and the profit is 2.52 million. We will quickly check that. So I'm now looking at the profit column, trying to look at the value in the status bar, and that corresponds with my results. I have just completed the fourth task. I hope you had a good learning on functions like use relationship, which could convert an inactive relationship into an active relationship at the time of execution, and then last date, and then a very versatile function called treat as. There is a simple quiz with the 10 questions. Please check the questions and ensure that you get the correct answers. Thank you for watching the video. See you all in the next video.